Hello, lovelies. Welcome to Horror 421, the podcast, with your host, your friendly small-town horror author, Charles Campbell. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the frights in this week's episode.
This episode of Horror 421, the podcast, is brought to you by Terror Tour. Music is a killer. Virginia Morgan is the lead singer of a band called the Valley Rats. They have embarked on a regional tour. There is excitement in the air, but there's also something else. One by one, members of the band receive ominous letters at each stop. At first, they think it is a harmless prank staged by a fan. Soon, they learn it is something much more sinister. The band will have to come together to play the show of their lives if there is any hope that they can survive the Terror Tour. Terror Tour can be found at valleyboypublications.com by clicking on the Shop tab. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Horror 421, the podcast. I'm your host, small-town horror author Charles Campbell, and today I have a very special guest. He is from Weekly Spooky fame, and he is the king of Strickfield as far as I'm concerned. Welcome to the show, Rob Fields.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, Rob, I've been a fan of yours for a while now, and I've admired your work from a distance. And just to let the listeners know, I speak about Weekly Spooky all the time on this podcast, but Rob is one of the originators of Weekly Spooky. He has contributed God knows how many stories to Henrique for this show. But Rob, I'd like for you to give our listening audience a little background about yourself and how you got into writing stories for Weekly Spooky. I'm interested in that story myself.
Well, I guess for years I've kind of been writing and doing my own little personal projects and everything. And when you had Henrique on the podcast, he may have mentioned that I kind of self-published a book years back called The April Fool, but that was my first foray or forte, however you say that, into writing. But I guess then I just kept writing for myself and everything. And then I believe it was October of 2019. I saw that Henrique was launching a weekly podcast called Weekly Spooky, and I usually try to support his work whenever I can. So I was listening to it for a while, and then I think at one point in the podcast he had said something about contributing stories to Weekly Spooky. So, but I messaged him, and he gave me the email address, so I pulled a story out of the archives, went back and reworked it and sent it to him. And he told me he liked it, and it was going to go on. And then he told me after that to go ahead and submit another one, and if they aired it, he would go ahead and put me in the contributor's crypt, and the rest is history.
Well, that's awesome, man. I certainly haven't heard everything you've written on Weekly Spooky because there's so much, but I've heard quite a number of your stories, and two of the more recent ones that stick out in my brain that I really enjoyed was your take on the urban legend Bloody Mary. When did that come out? A couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
And the other one was the novella. I listened to it while I was working, Blood and Snow. Those were two very good stories, and the folks out there listening, go subscribe to Weekly Spooky and definitely check those two out. But Rob has a ton of stories on Weekly Spooky, and they're all really, really well written and very well narrated by Henrique. So Rob, what got you into your give me a little bit about your background. How did you come up, and what drew you to the horror genre? I'm always interested in that from other horror fans. So what led you down the horror path?
I guess, to be fair, I kind of tried to get into it when I was younger, watching Saturday afternoons on Superhost, which was a local horror host program in Cleveland. At least when I was able to pull it in using the rabbit ears, because wasn't allowed to get cable at the time, but so it was rabbit ears or nothing on channel 43, and Superhost would usually show some family friendly horror like Godzilla or Universal Monsters or something like that. But I guess, I don't know, I guess I just wasn't getting so much into it. But then I guess what really pulled me into horror was at the end of my 8th grade year, It was in choir class, if you can believe that. But it was, we had nothing going on that week. Basically we were just sitting around, and one of the guys brought in a video cassette called which would be known as Night of the Living Dead. And for it took us 3 days during that class to watch the movie, but um, there was just something about that movie that stuck with me. I mean, in fact, it came to be my favorite horror movie, my favorite movie of all time. But that was the movie that sent me down my dark path.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. Uh, so what are some of the, once you got into Night of the Living Dead, what other films kind of drew your attention? Were you like a zombie guy? Is that what you gravitated toward? Or for me, it was the Evil Dead, the first, the Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell flick that came out in like 1981. That was it for me, and then I was on the horror movie path. But yeah, what other films or books did you gravitate toward? I'm just interested. I always love talking about horror movies.
Well, when I was in, I guess after watching Night of the Living Dead and wanting to get into horror movies more, through my junior high years, I kept hearing how people talking about all these movies they watched and everything, all the Fridays and nightmares and things like that, Evil Dead. I mean, I didn't know a lot about them, just what little bits and pieces that I heard.
Right.
I heard the name Jason, I heard the name Freddy, I heard the name Michael, and but again, it wasn't until Night of the Living Dead that I actually got more curious about all these movies. So I guess I wasn't into one particular thing at the time. I just wanted to soak up as much horror as I can as I could at the time, and there was a lot of it. I mean,
Oh
in
yeah.
town we had as many as 4 video rental places. Good luck trying to find one now.
Oh yeah. Netflix actually has a documentary on their platform about the last blockbuster. So there apparently is one left. I forget which state it's in, but yeah, you're right. And those were a staple when I was a kid. No, it was more the mom and pop video store variety than Blockbuster. So we had Valley Video and little video shops all over the place, and they were fun to go peruse the horror movies. So yeah, that was near and dear to me as a child growing up, going to those places and renting those movies. Um, so I'm kind of going to fast forward just a little bit because there's something really interesting to me that you have created, and I'd like to know your process on how you came up with it. A and B, how you sustain it on Weekly Spooky and keep things in this world that you've created. So Rob has created a world, and it's set in a fictional town of Strickfield, Ohio. So I want to know where that came about and what the process was into putting those characters together for that really ghostly and creepy place.
Okay, well, Strickfield was originally just going to be the town or village that I created just for my urban legend reimaginings, but I guess I put out too many at one time because at the end of one episode, I want to say it was the People Can Lick 2 one that I did, that Henrik said that I was starting to create my own little that was creating my own little universe right here. And I realized the moment he had said that, I knew that I couldn't just put Strickfield on the back burner anymore. I had to go with it now. So I just kept building on top of it, and as long as Strickfield was going to be a mainstay, I was going to go ahead and create a staple set of characters and try to create some monster of the week type stories, and then even some that were kind of a mythology I'm working on.
Well, you're doing a very good job because it's it's captivating, and it does bring you in, and it makes it very, very interesting to keep it in the same universe. So um when a Rob Field story comes out on Weekly Spooky, unless you have something out there that's not set in Strickfield. I haven't heard anything yet. I know it's going to be another creepy tale from Strickfield, Ohio. But
I think out of all the podcasts I have, I think Night at the Galleria is the only one release that's not set in Strickfield.
I'm going to jot that down. I don't think I've heard that one yet. Awesome. Awesome. And one of the other things I like, especially in one of the more recent ones I just heard, I like the use of character names of people that are associated with Henrik. So I like the teacher, Miss Rodolphe. That was pretty cool. So I've done that a couple times myself. So I like the little shout outs that you do from time to time. That's pretty cool. All right. So there was something else that caught my eye when I was reviewing some of your stuff. Um, Henrik released a book called Campfire Stories to Tell in the Dark, and you were one of the authors, and David O'Hanlon, I believe, he contributed to that book. Um, tell me what that was like, actually getting that your story into that book. I haven't read that book yet. I need to pick up a copy from weeklyspooky.com. But what was it to how was it to put that together and see it with the other fine contributors in the book?
Well, having the actual copy in my hand, it was amazing. As far as us putting the book together, that was Henrik just put all of us together in a Facebook chat one day and said, "I'd like to do a family friendly anthology series here because I guess for during COVID time on every Wednesday he'd be on a live feed on Facebook, and he'd be reading some family friendly horror stories, just to all of us. It was a good way to pass a Wednesday night when
Right.
we were on lockdown. But I'm thinking he must have got the idea to want to put a book of his own together, and he contacted a bunch of us, and he put like some different themes on there, and we just had to choose one. Mine happened to be vampires and a mall. So I
Okay.
created a kid-friendly story out of that, which was A Night at the Galleria.
Okay, which is the story you just mentioned. And so that was actually read on Weekly Spooky as well then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go check that out probably today. But that's awesome, man. You're doing some great work. So as a writer, now I know that you said you put together one book in. I can't remember if you said did you publish the book or is it out there for people to consume if they want it, or is it something you still have on the shelf somewhere?
It was probably self-published years ago. It could be on Amazon. Maybe I'd have to do some digging on it.
Okay. Well, as a writer, I'd love to know your creative process because your stories are very well written. They're very captivating. They draw you in very quickly, which is what I aspire to do when I'm writing, to kind of grab the reader and don't let them go until they read the end. And I think you do a very good job at that. So, uh, what is your creative process when you're putting together a story? What are some of the things that you do to prepare, and some of the things you do as you're writing a story, whether it be a short story like for Weekly Spooky or the novella like you did for Weekly Spooky Blood and Snow, if it's something a little longer? What are some of the things you do to put something together?
I just basically let the imagination go. I mean, that's pretty much where a lot of my stories come from. My imagination just doesn't shut off. I can't make it shut off. I mean, I've even had a few nightmares too, to where I published a story from. People Can Lick. My reimagining of People Can Lick Too came from a nightmare.
Oh wow.
I mean, I don't have any. I guess I don't have any. I mean, I do think through some of my stories to see as far as how they work and everything. But I mean, now in the, I don't really. I just kind of think it through and then write my ideas down as I go.
Yeah.
And if I have it ready to write, I just go ahead and do it. And I come back and take the power tools to it and tweak it up, polish it, so to speak. So I guess I don't have a too much of a set process unless it comes to the miniseries. Henrik wants an outline for the miniseries, and then once he
Yeah.
approves it, then I write it.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't done a mini series or anything like that for Weekly Spooky yet. I'm always busy trying to put a book out and do a podcast, and I'll he's read most of that Horror 421 book. He just needs to read one more, and I'll have an audio book. So Henry, get to popping on that last story. But yeah, I'm always interested in the creative process. So for me, I kind of have the beginning and the end in my brain, and then I kind of a pantser in the middle, kind of flying by the seat of my pants as I go. And the ending hardly ever ends the way that I originally envisioned. So
I've had that happen before.
So I go off on all kinds of rabbit holes when I'm writing, and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't want to end it like that. Maybe I want to do this. So it changes about 80% of the time from my original idea.
Also, to be fair, sometimes Henrik and I will collab. Oftentimes, Henrik and I will collaborate on stories. We'll throw ideas to each other and say, "How about this?" or "Why don't we do this?" or maybe we could throw this in here or but sometimes the two of us will collaborate and create a story together, or as I told Henrik at Wasteland, sometimes I feel like the chef and he's giving me his order, because sometimes he'll say, "Why don't like for the next mini series, or I'd like to I'd like to have this and this and this in here." So it's like, okay, so
Yeah, well, that's cool. The relationship that you have with Henrik, and how you guys can shoot ideas off of one another. He is a great collaborator. I collaborated with him when I first started this podcast because I had no idea how to start a podcast, and he's hosted a gazillion of them. So why not ask someone that knows, right? So he kind of guided me in that direction. And then, I was fortunate enough for him to put a few of my stories on Weekly Spooky, and the way he narrates them, they make them so much better than I think they are when I'm reading them. So yeah, he does a really good job. So Henrik, shout out to you, man. Great job. Um, so when I guess my next question is, since you put so many things together, so many stories together, do you have the itch to sit down and write a full blown novel to put out there and publish? Because I think your work is really good, and I'd love to read a fully blown published novel out of the Strickfield universe. Is that something that may be in your future plans?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I did. I do. I've only given. I've only given this to one other person here, but I have. But as far as the Angel of Death character, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. But I actually have a whole novel written about her prior to Weekly Spooky coming out.
Oh wow. Okay, so the novel's actually coming out.
I don't know if it's ever going to be published or not, but I mean, I would let certain people read it if they wanted to.
Okay, well, I think I may want to read that.
To see where Rage, in case people want to know where Rage got her roots at before Weekly Spooky came along.
Yeah, and I did listen to that one. That's one of the stories I have listened to. But you have so many. Do you have any idea how many stories you have on Weekly Spooky now?
Over 50, I would say.
Yeah, and he's coming up on episode 200, so that's a good chunk. That's a good chunk. Um, and so for the listeners out there, Weekly Spooky again is a weekly podcast that Henrik put together, and it premieres every Wednesday for the regular episodes. And Rob has, like you said, over 50 out there. But there's a huge catalog, so you can go back and listen to all kinds of stuff. And it's like the box of chocolates. If you don't like it this week, you're going to like it next week. And if you're a new listener, you have so many in the catalog. If the story's really not gelling with you, all you got to do is skip to the next one, because there's a ton of them out there. So Rob has done a great job contributing to that. Now, something else I want to bring up, and it's more the Bloody Mary line from that story. What is your take on urban legends? I know you recently went back and watched. I think you at least watched the first movie. You may have. I think I've seen posts where you may have watched a couple of them, but I rewatched the first movie a couple weeks ago, and I enjoyed that movie. So, what is your take on urban legends and how they inspire you to write?
Well, as far as watching that series, I guess seeing that you watched Urban Legend, I guess kind of gave me the push to rewatch that series again, and so I got my '88 films box out, and as I watched them, I just jotted down any urban legend or possible urban legend that I saw, so to see which ones I had maybe would like to reimagine down the road and everything. And I mean, it's just one of my favorite film series.
Yeah, well, it is really good, and it does keep your attention. And that movie, the original movie, it kind of kept me guessing. So I won't spoil it for anyone. I mean, it's been out a long time. It came out in the late '90s, I think. But yeah, if anyone out there hasn't seen it, it does have a little twist that I didn't really see coming when I watched it the first time, which was good, which was really good. So without spoiling it too much, I do want you to dive in a little more on the Bloody Mary tale. I really enjoyed that, by the way. It was very well written and it kept me engaged through the entire story. So, outside of the movie, um, what was your motivation? What was your take on that? And maybe give the listeners a little synopsis of what that's about, because that's one of the more recent weekly spooky offerings. So, I'd like you to dive into that one just a little bit.
Okay. It was another point in time when Henrik and I were talking about urban legends and things like that. I wanted to eventually do a take on Bloody Mary, and I knew there were a bunch of different variations of the story out there. And no, the comic strip that has nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
I even note that in my story.
Yep.
But I eventually decided to ask Henrik what he would like to see, and he said Mary Worth was definitely his favorite. So, okay, I would go with Mary Worth. But for the longest time, and I don't know how long this sat on the back burner, but I just could not seem to pull anything tangible that I would want to do to reimagine it. And then I guess back in October, when this last October, Henrik had released a couple of um, compilations of family-friendly Halloween stories, and and he mentioned something about if you'd like to hear more family-friendly content, let us know. But I decided, okay, I think I'm going to start writing some family-friendly content that way people don't think I'm a one-trick pony here, and all I write about is exploitation and
Right.
stuff like that. I mean, I try to do different things with my stories and everything, but eventually the idea finally, it, I mean, sometimes once in a while I keep pondering ideas, and finally there it is. Boom. It just finally hits. And that's what Bloody Mary was like here. I knew I even knew how I was going to incorporate it into a family friendly type element here, so once I got, working on that, then it kind of wrote itself.
Yeah, it was a very interesting take, and for the listeners, I do encourage you to go listen to it because it's a very unique Bloody Mary story, and the character it centers around. Um, he's an interesting guy, and uh, I, I I don't want to spoil anything, but I do like the fact that I'll mention this, that he's unscarable. So I'll leave it at that. It frustrates people that he is that way. Uh,
Actually, that's a she.
or she, I'm sorry.
Madeline Donnerly is the name
Y-
of the main character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's Aileen Donnerly's twin cousin, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know why I got he on the brain. I listened to it a couple weeks ago whenever it came out. But yeah, she was unscarable. So that was an interesting take for me, and the frustration it built with the other folks around her. Um, there's a reason, and it was a cool reason, and I'm not going to spoil the reason, but it was a great story Rob. I really enjoyed it.
But yeah, but you asked for a synopsis for the story too, right? So, but yeah, as you started to say that, yeah, basically Madeline Donnerly, she's kind of she's Aileen Donnerly's twin cousin in a matter of speaking here. She basically she loves her horror films, she loves her video games. She doesn't really get scared so much. In fact, she's pretty laid back and everything, and that's why she doesn't really let things bother her so much. Even her group of friends that like to pick on her and give her a hard time and everything. So, but somehow she finds herself invited to be at slumber parties with these girls every Friday night while they're in junior high. And every time they try to scare her, and every time she's not budging. But so one night they decide to dabble into the legend of Bloody Mary, and it kind of comes back to haunt to bite them later on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and I love that take. It was an awesome take, and I'm like, when I was listening to it, I'm like, where's he going with this? Where's he going with this? And then the spin of what it was actually going on, I was like, oh, that's pretty damn cool. So yeah, that was a great story. So you guys go out and listen to it. And if you're in the mood for giving a synopsis, I do want you to, if you can, give a synopsis on the novella that Henrik read, Blood and Snow. I really enjoyed that too. I listened to that one more recently.
Okay, when it came to Blood and Snow, as far as I given a synopsis on it, one night, brain farting here. The name of the lead character.
Well, don't ask me because I got the he and she's confused a second ago.
Okay, but there's this heiress who had her last name is Grande.
Yeah, that's
And
right, Grande. Because I was thinking of Ariana Grande when I listened to it.
but the heiress to the Grande estate ended up having to run away from the house when people were there to try and kill her.
Yeah,
And she grabs she grabs a sports car and tries to flee, and this Hummer's chasing after her. But and then they end up going into towards Strickfield, and unfortunately, it is really snowing and everything. And you know how sports cars can be on that kind of weather. But long story short, there she ends up crashing the car, and her killer ends up going after her, little realizing that they're in the backwoods of Strickfield, which is not someplace you want to end up if you're around that area. Mainly because there's all kinds of stuff going on back there, things ranging from cannibalism to ghouls to just, this possibly the stuff of your nightmares. But anyway, at one point she ends up getting shot up pretty bad, and she ends up falling into this lake, which has long since been contaminated by toxic waste.
right.
And as a result, she comes back as a new type of zombie.
Well, when I was listening to it, and I'm not going to spoil anything, when she came back, she kind of put me in mind from the description of a White Walker from Game of Thrones a little bit.
I have that series, but I've never watched it yet.
Yeah. Well, she put me in that frame of mind. That's what I imagined her looking like from your description. So she sort of looked like a White Walker from Game of Thrones, but a lot smarter um, than those zombies.
Completely coincidental in this
Oh,
case.
no. Yeah. No, I was just letting you know that's what it put me in the mind of, but it was definitely original. It wasn't copying anything, and the take was excellent. So, and
But to finish the synopsis, yeah, 1 year later, the girl's mom ends up bringing some people along with her to the backwoods of Strickfield to try and find her and bring her home, and has some pretty disastrous results and a twist that you probably will not see coming.
I guarantee you will not see coming. Yeah, those are two that I really, really enjoyed. So, out of all the stories that you've put out there on Weekly Spooky. Is there one that is a personal favorite? Is there one that was a struggle, a labor of love, something that you're more proud of than all the rest, or are they all your children on an equal level?
I would definitely claim them all as my children. I mean, I definitely don't write stories just to put them out there.
Right.
I mean, I want to, each time I write something for Weekly Spooky, I want to have fun with it. And hopefully my listeners will have fun with it too. And even Henrik, when he's sitting in his studio or dark room or whatever, wherever he's reading it at, I want him to even have fun with it too. But I suppose if you want me to peg one, I think I'm going to go with my first mini series, which is Prom Queen Killer. That truly was a labor of love right there. That was one that Henrik and I did a lot of collaboration on together.
Yeah, that was a good one. I did listen to that one. That was the 4-parter, right? Am I remembering that one right?
The very first 4-parter that Weekly Spooky ever did.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember listening to that as I worked, and it was very compelling. And the way he ended them they were um, sort of cliffhanger-ish. I like the way that he ended each episode, if I remember correctly. So to give the listeners, and I don't want you to just keep giving synopsis, but the stories are so good, I want the people to go actually listen to them. Prom Queen, can you give a brief rundown on what that's about and what listeners can expect?
Okay. Years back in Shore City, which is which is a big megalopolis that in the Strickfield universe. This family was out driving around shopping. They were on a big interstate and everything, and the Laura Lee Hardy, the main character, was got into a heated argument with her homophobic older brother, and one thing leads to another, and the family ends up getting into a horrible accident while on the freeway there. A few years later, Laura Lee is in Strickfield with her mother and living in an apartment, and she has a girlfriend that she goes to school with, and when they go to school, they meet another friend um, the, in the high school gymnasium, so that the principal can announce candidates for the junior and senior prom. There's candidates for the junior prom queen and the senior prom queen, but you only got to worry about the senior class prom queen candidates here, though. But as time goes on, it's like some of the other candidates are starting to fall like flies here. And you kind of wonder if someone from Laura Lee's past is coming back to settle the score with her, leading to a prom that may not soon be forgotten.
And I remember when I was listening to that and I was completely engaged, I could see movie images from that story. So I think that would lend itself really well to a movie. And a lot of your stories are that way, actually. When I think about it, the ones I've listened to, I could envision them in some sort of anthology series, or if they're long enough, they could be made into something feature length. So I know you said People Can Lick too, and that was I remember that being part of Scare Waves. Um, it- did you contribute to that film?
I have not contributed anything to any of Henrik's movies, but if he ever asked me for anything, I'd be open. But no, nothing of mine ever got made into film.
Okay, well, yeah, I saw that particular verbiage on that DVD cover. I think People Can Lick too, and I wondered where that came from. So I
I've
guess it,
seen a few. I've seen a few different versions of People Can Lick Too.
yeah,
Bloody Urban Legends, Bloody Mary had a
yeah,
take on it.
yeah,
Campfire Tales. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie or not, but that
yeah,
one has a take on that, and I definitely thought that was a good urban legend to
yeah, yeah.
reimagine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're bringing waves of memories back to me now. But yeah, that okay. That's cool. I would love to see, maybe something you've come up with on a screen somewhere. I think your stories lend to that very well, especially, and it doesn't matter if it's the longer stuff or the shorter stuff. it could be incorporated into an anthology. Henrik just released that found footage series, which I thought was really good. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yep.
Yeah, but he had his folks that contributed those stories, and I think your stories would lend itself well to that, especially Prom Queen. I'd love to see that in a feature length movie. But anyway,
Hey, Henrik, if you're watching this, hint, 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 hint.
hint, hint, Henrik. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I talked to him about possibly doing something with Horror 421, the short stories in there, but it hasn't gone any further than talk, and it's really because of my side. But yeah, a lot of the stories that I've heard you put out there, like I said, I would love to see them in a video medium. So yeah, Henrik, if you're listening, let's see if we can make that happen one day. That would be awesome.
Well, notice you've kind of put together your own universe with your 421 and everything too. So I mean,
Well, this is true. This is true. Yeah, my universe is that little stretch of road I grew up on. So it's very small town, southern. You can hear it in my voice, that kind of thing. But yeah, I find other people's perspectives fascinating, and I love the universe you've created in Strickfield. And do you have anything you're working on like right now that you can share and tell the audience about? Anything that's on the burner, so to speak?
well, Henrik's got several more of my Strickfield stories just waiting to be put out and everything. There are going to be more stories coming with Bella Tabon down the road. I think at some point there is a possibility that we could end up seeing something with the Angel of Death again, but that's going to but that's going to be up to Henrik when that happens. I'm just waiting to see what his idea is for that. I am working on a few other projects that he and I have discussed. There will be stuff for Halloween, stuff for Christmas, even next Valentine's Day.
Oh wow!
And I am working on something that'll be coming out in the next couple months here. I don't know if I'm allowed to say what that is yet, but
Okay.
I'm definitely I'm definitely putting the spit and polish to it, going through it and tweaking things, rereading it, doing all that stuff before I submit it.
Well, that's cool, man. I saw that you were at and I forget the name of the convention you guys have out there.
Cinema
Uh,
Wasteland.
yeah, Cinema Wasteland. I'm 54 years old, man. I forget things all the time.
I'm
But
52. I'm not too far behind you.
well, Cinema Wasteland. What kind of experience is that? I've never been to a Cinema Wasteland. Is that local to Ohio, or is it something that goes across the country?
Yeah, it's mainly around the Cleveland area. It's a small convention and everything, but it's there's a dealer room. There's two movie rooms. We usually get a handful of guests in there, and there's some of the bigger vendors that come in and sell movies and things like that. And it's nice meeting up with people and talking to them and everything. I'm one of the staff there. I run one of the movie rooms.
Oh, cool.
It's not as big as like Days of the Dead or Horror Hound or anything like that along the way. But I mean, it's a small convention. It's intimate and everything, and it's more of a drive-in and grindhouse show than anything.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool, man. The only convention I really participate in on a regular basis is Days of the Dead in Atlanta because it's just a couple hours away. And I love the vibe at those horror conventions. You get to meet so many interesting people, and I gained a lot of every year. I gain a lot of new readers through that convention, and I'd love to go to more conventions. It's just I need to kind of keep it within my geographical area. I can't travel all over the country. I do have a day job, but I find them very interesting, and you get to meet a lot of cool folks. So, and I
Yeah, we
can't,
do.
yeah, and I can't remember. You may have said this at the beginning of the podcast, but how did you and Henrik meet originally?
Now that you mentioned Cinema Wasteland, and big shout out to Ken Kish for putting that show on and keeping it going all these years. But Henrik, yeah, it was actually Cinema Wasteland where I first met Henrik. I wasn't on staff at the time. Before being staff, I was a 3-day pass holder, and but it was on a Sunday. I want to say it was an October show at the time. Cinema Wasteland is on twice a year at this point. There's a spring show and there's a fall show, which is usually around early October. But it was the Sunday. It was the last day of the convention, and I don't know if you've had this at any of the conventions you go around, but sometimes you might walk around and see vendors might have Sunday specials going on and things
Oh
like that.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
okay, well, that's what it was like at Cinema Wasteland back then. And I saw this teenage kid sitting by the parking lot doors there. He had a little table set up, and he had all of his homemade movies that he had made up to that point. And I was looking him over and seeing what he got. He quoted me. He said, "For $30, you can have everything on the table here." Now I didn't
Wow.
now I didn't jump at it right away, but I kept that offer in the back of my mind because I wanted to see what else was around the dealer room and everything. But ultimately, I came back to the guy I would come to know as Henrique Couto's table, and I said, "Is that $30 offer still stand?" And he after he confirmed it was, I said, "Done." And he got excited and threw everything threw all his movies and everything, and even threw a couple CDs into the bag and everything. And as I watched his stuff, it's like, it's like this kid's good.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go somewhere someday. And then pretty much every show thereafter, I'd been seeing him there, and we get to talking a little bit and everything. And I guess eventually we became friends.
Wow. You got a good deal too, man. If you got everything, one of everything on the table for $30, that's pretty good.
Now, a lot of those movies I saw, they're on and you can probably find them at henflix.com. They're on a Blu-ray set called Backyard Henrik Couto's Backyard Legacy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, everybody, you go to henflix.com, and I've got my own little Henrik collection going on. I don't have everything that he's released, but I've got a good collection of movies started, and they are enjoyable. And you may have heard me say this before, but I discovered Henrik picked up a movie at the dollar store, and it was one he produced. It was The Girl in the Crawl Space. Is that the name of it?
That's that's a John
Yeah,
O. Dalton
Yep,
movie.
yep. And I picked that up and watched it, and I was like, not expecting much from a dollar store movie, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually pretty good. And I love the way the characters interacted with one another. And so I started looking up, uh, actors and producers on that film on Facebook, and then I discovered Henrik, and then I you know, uh, kind of went through a lot of the things that he produced and or directed, and I was like, oh man, I like this cat. So that's when I reached out to him, and found out he did Weekly Spooky and all that stuff. So yeah, yeah. So Henrik's a great guy. I really enjoy speaking with him, and he's a good collaborator for sure, and he's very helpful. So if anyone out there is listening and needs advice on maybe how to start a podcast, or want to get into direct the directorial realm of movie making, he's a good source to ask. He's a very busy guy, but he he does respond, and he's very courteous. So Henrik, I think we've kissed your butt enough. So
I think we're just giving him credit where credit's due here.
yeah, we are. I'm just joking with Henrik. All right. Well, cool. Now, Rob, I know you're working on stuff specifically for Weekly Spooky, and that's kind of the way I'm tagging this podcast. Rob Fields of Weekly Spooky, because you've contributed so much. But now's the time I'm going to just let you share any information if people want to get in touch with you, if they if you have any advice for anyone trying to get into writing or starting up their own short stories or whatever. I'm going to give you the floor, and you can promote yourself in any way you want, and then we'll close out the show.
Well, I would say to those people who actually want to get into the craft of writing and everything, and that's exactly what it is. It's a craft. I mean, it's not just something you can go out and do. I mean, you got to pretty much, um, I guess basically it's like this book that Stephen King wrote called On Writing. Um, Very good book, but if there's one thing I've taken away from it, it's something he said called which he states, if you don't have the time to read, then you have neither the time nor the tools to write. So, but that's basically the thing. If you truly want to write and write well, then you need to just read, keep reading, and this is how you learn things. I mean, that's how I came up learning and everything. But I'm not going to claim I'm the best author out there. I mean, I'm definitely not in any bookstores per se. I just write for the podcast and everything. I mean, it's not about, for me, it's not about making money. It's not about becoming a millionaire. It's not about doing that. To me, I just want to get my writing out there and have people hear it and enjoy it. And, you know, if somebody people hear my stories and I've made someone's day because of it and everything, then, you know, then that makes me happy. And as long as Weekly Spooky's still on there and I can keep contributing to that, then I'm going to keep writing the stories. As long as people want to hear them, I'm going to keep writing.
Well, Rob, the stories are amazing, and I've told people before I'm never going to blow smoke. If I didn't like them, I wouldn't say anything. You know, it's that old saying: if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But everything that I've heard, it's top notch. The universe you built in Strickfield is strong and solid. So keep doing what you do, man. And if you ever put something out there and publish it for people to consume, I'll definitely be one of the guys purchasing. And I know you've supported me in the past, so I appreciate that. And I'll definitely reciprocate. If I see a Rob Fields novel or short story collection come across a website or Amazon, I'll definitely pick it up. So
I only have one currently at the moment. If you go to weeklyspooky.com, there's a link called the Strickfield novel or the Strickfield book. And that basically is a compilation of many of the past weekly spooky stories on there, and including 2 that are exclusive only to that book.
Cool. I'm going to pick that up. I didn't know it was out there, so I'll go check it out. And that goes for you listeners too. So you can get a Rob Fields book with his short story collection from Weekly Spooky Stories, and 2 stories that aren't on Weekly Spooky, exclusive to that book only. And is it just called the Strickfield book? Is that what you said?
Let me see here. I believe it's called the Strickfield. I want to say it's yeah. Here I am brain farting again.
Oh, that's all right. I did too. I mean, I changed the gender of one of your main characters in the story, but that's all right.
Okay, it is called Horrors of Strickfield.
All right, Horrors of Strickfield. So you guys can go to weeklyspooky.com and probably click on the book section and find it.
Yep. In fact, I'm there right now. 40 stories, 2 of which are only in the book. Get your copy, and there's a link that's to click here.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, Rob, I really appreciated you coming on the show today. I had fun chatting with you, and it was finally great to meet you. Like I said, I've admired your work from afar, and it's been good. And thank you once again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And guys, you can find me at Charles Campbell Author on Instagram. We also have a Horror 421 the podcast Facebook page. I do contribute to Weekly Spooky from time to time, so you can find some of my short stories there. And you can always find all of my links and stuff at valleyboypublications.com. So thank you once again for tuning in to this week's episode of Horror 421 the podcast, and we'll see you next episode. Take care.
We hope you had a horrific time, lovelies. Thank you for tuning in to Horror 421, the podcast. Be sure to like us on YouTube and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.